so far today. The time is now 6:36, and John McCartney, Director of Research with property consultant Savills, is with me now. Good morning, John.
Hi, Donald. How are you?
Very good. I suppose we've all been kind of assessing the post-Brexit landscape to one extent or another, and by and large, I suppose the mood is it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. The uncertainty, or the certainty even, is going to be bad for Irish business. You're taking a slightly different tack. You've looked at I suppose the impact on retail, and you're not so down on it.
Yes, well, I think it's easy to see some of the obvious negative implications of Brexit for the economy in general and for retail in particular. Clearly, it brings an additional layer of uncertainty that wasn't there before, and we know from recent experience that Irish consumers don't like uncertainty. When they're faced with an uncertain future, they have tended to increase their savings, and that's obviously bad for the retail sector. Likewise, most of the macroeconomic estimates indicate that Brexit in net terms will cause a slowdown, and that would lead to slower jobs growth, and ultimately you would expect that to percolate its way through to a slowdown in personal consumption expenditure. So there are certainly headwinds for retail, but what we're also saying is that we think that the exchange rate swing will be potentially beneficial. If you go back 3 weeks ago, Irish consumers were having to give up about €1.32 to buy a pound's worth of imports from a UK source. Today, they're only having to give up about €1.17. So there's a big swing there, and that's a saving that will accrue either to retailers or customers. And I think the really interesting question is who's going to get the benefit of that 12% swing.
And how quickly, I suppose, as well.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. Well, the exchange rate obviously has moved very quickly in the wake of the exit vote. We think that it's very likely that as the UK goes through further monetary easing, that the exchange rate will remain favourable for Irish consumers.
How important are UK retailers? Do they dominate now the Irish retail landscape?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting subject. There has, over a period of 20 years, been a sort of an anglicisation of the Irish high streets and indeed shopping centres. But what is interesting is that in previous recessions, particularly where the UK economy was under pressure, we've seen UK retail brands adopt a very introverted posture. You know, they focus on the home market to try and get their ducks in a row back at home, often to the detriment of their businesses outside of the UK, and we've seen that in Ireland before, that during the last recession a lot of UK brands retrenched and either shut down or downsized in Ireland. And again, you know, we're not sure that that's going to happen this time because, of course, from a UK retailer point of view, if they're selling something in Ireland, 3 weeks ago they were getting 76p for every euro worth of goods that they sold. Today they're going to be getting somewhere in the order of 85.5p. So there's a clear incentive for UK retailers because of the currency
in the euro area.
Indeed.
That's short term, I suppose. That 12% swing is very dramatic. Will retailers be able to plan around that kind of, you know, volatile currency market? I mean, it works for them today. It might not work for them in 6 months' time. It probably didn't work for them 6 months ago.
Yeah, indeed. As I said, our long-term view is that sterling is going to remain weak because of monetary policy divergence. But even leaving that aside, I think the trick for UK retailers now will be to reduce the amount of goods and services that they're sourcing in euro. So the more that they can, I suppose, base their costs on sterling purchases, the better for them. And that could have negative knock-on consequences for the local economy here in Ireland.
In terms of expansion, you know, will they be incentivised to expand in Ireland now as opposed to expanding in the UK, or is it possible even to be thinking in those kind of longer term, in that longer term way?
Well, the good news for the Irish retail sector is that it's come into this whole situation in a pretty healthy state. Nearly every indicator that you would look at on the retail economy dashboard is pointing in a positive direction. And interestingly, what we're seeing for the first time in more than 6 years is that consumer credit is now growing again. We had 75 months of negative growth in consumer credit.
The retail sector was hammered, almost more than any other bar construction, I suppose, in the crash.
Absolutely. It was in that perfect storm. Consumers, you had 345,000 job losses from peak to trough. In addition, you had pay cuts and increased taxes. So there was a perfect storm in that sector. But all of those factors are now reversing. We've seen more than half of the jobs been regained at this stage. We've still got a ways to go, but that's very positive. We see earnings now rising for 6 successive quarters, tax cuts coming in. So you would have to say that, based on the fundamentals, the Irish retail economy is an attractive proposition for UK retailers.
John McCartney, I beg your pardon, Director of Research with Savills. Thanks for coming in.